Good morning, friends. I'm Dr. Balaravi, Assistant Professor in the Department of Economics. So, students, in today's class, we are going to discuss about the measures of inflation. The inflation meaning all of us very familiar because it is a substantial increase in the price of the commodity is considered as inflation, right? Now, clearly we will focus what is the formula to estimate this inflation. At the same time, what are the measures to control this inflation? See, whether with the help of monetary measures it is controllable, or with the help of fiscal measures we can control this inflation. Normally, with the help of these monetary measures as well as fiscal measures, we can control this inflation, right? So, in this way, we are going to discuss in today's class. The inflation, in the sense, it is a decline in the purchasing power of a given currency over a period of time. A quantitative estimate of the rate at which the decline in the purchasing power occurs can be reflected in the increase of an average price level of goods and services over a period of time. The rise in the general price level, often expressed as a percentage, means that a unit of currency effectively buys less than it did in previous years. So let us concentrate on the formula to estimate inflation. So in order to estimate or calculate this inflation rate, we have to use this inflation rate formula. So this is the simple formula. It allows to see the percentage of increase or reduction in the cost between given years. So once we understand the inflation rate, it is very easier to create a budget. The inflation rate is equal to B minus A divided by A into 100. See, in this formula, A in the sense it is the starting point in the CPI. CPI in the sense consumer price index for a specific good or service, which could either be a specific year or month. And B would be the current recording in the consumer price index for this same good or service. So to use this formula, subtract A from B to find how much the prices of that specific good or service has changed. Then divide this result by A because A is the starting price. So which will leave us with a decimal number. So convert this decimal number into a percentage by multiplying it by 100. So the result is the rate of inflation. So in this way, we can calculate this inflation. So with the help of this inflation formula, we can calculate this inflation rate, right? Now let us concentrate on the measures to arrest this inflation. How we can arrest this inflation? So a country's financial regulator showed us the important responsibility of keeping inflation stable. It is done by implementing measures through monetary policy, which refers to the actions of a central bank or other committees that determine the size and growth rate of the monetary policy. In the US, the Fed's monetary policy goals include moderate long-term interest rate, price stability, and maximum employment, as well as each of these goals is intended to promote a stable financial environment. The Federal Reserve clearly communicates the long-term inflation goals in order to keep a steady long-term rate of inflation, which is thought to be beneficial to the economy. So, as far as price stability or a relatively constant level of inflation is concerned, it allows business to plan for the future since they know what to expect. The Fed believes that this will promote maximum employment, which is determined by non-monetary factors that fluctuates over time and are therefore subject to change. So for this reason, the Fed doesn't set a specific goal for maximum employment, and it largely determined by employers' assessment. So the maximum employment doesn't mean zero unemployment, as at any given time there is a certain level of volatility as the people vacate and start new jobs. Monetary authorities also take exceptional measures in extreme conditions of the economy. For instance, following the 2008 financial crisis, the US Fed has kept the interest rate near zero and pursued a bond buying program called quantitative easing. Some critics of the program alleged it would cause a spike in inflation in the US dollar. But inflation peaked in 2009 and declined steadily over the next 8 years. There are many complex reasons why QE did not lead to inflation or hyperinflation, though the simplest explanation is that the recession itself was a very prominent deflationary environment and quantitative easing supported its efforts. So consequently, the US policymakers have attempted to keep inflation steady at around 2% per year. The European Central Bank has also pursued aggressive quantitative easing to counter deflation in the Eurozone, and some places have experienced negative interest rates due to fears that deflation could take hold in the Eurozone and lead to economic stagnation. Moreover, the countries that are experiencing higher rates of growth can absorb higher rates of inflation. India's target is around 4%, while Brazil aims for 3.5%. Now, let us concentrate on the monetary measures. See, the monetary measures are mainly very useful to control the inflation. So the first monetary measure is bank rate policy. The bank rate policy is used as an important instrument to control the inflation. The bank rate is also called the central bank rediscount rate. Actually, it is the rate at which the central bank buys or rediscount the eligible bills of exchange, as well as other commercial papers presented by commercial banks to build their reserves. Here, the central bank performs the function as lender of the last resort. The bank rate policy as a monetary measure to control inflation works in two ways. During inflation, the central bank raises the interest rate due to which the borrowing costs go up. As a result, commercial bank borrowings from the central bank reduces. With the reduced borrowings from the central bank, the flow of money from the commercial bank to the public also gets reduced. This is how the bank credit decides the extent to which the inflation is controlled. The bank rate sets the trend for general market interest rate, specifically in the short run. As the central bank raises the interest rate with a view to curtailing the money supply in the market. The commercial banks also raise their commercial borrowing rates for the public, thereby making the borrowings dear. Other general market rate follows the suit with the decreased borrowing capacity of individuals. The inflation is controlled due to reduced money flows to the society, right? Then the next one is variable reserve ratio. The variable reserve ratio is also called the cash reserve ratio. Is a certain portion of the total demand and time deposits that the commercial banks are required to maintain in the form of cash reserves with central bank. The cash reserve ratio is often determined as well as imposed by the central bank with a view to controlling the money supply. When the central bank raises the cash reserve ratio, the lending capacity of the commercial bank reduces, due to which the flow of money from the banks to the public also reduces. Thus, it helps in controlling the rise in the price to the extent it is caused by the bank credit to the public. So the next thing is open market operations. So actually these open market operations are concerned. It is by the sale as well as purchase of government securities as well as the bonds by the central bank. The central bank buys and sells these government securities and bonds to the public through commercial banks. The government securities are sold to these commercial banks such that a certain amount of bank deposits is transferred to the central bank. As a result, the credit creation capacity of the central bank reduces. Thus, the flow of money from the banks to the public also gets reduced. Therefore, these are some major monetary measures that countries use to keep the inflationary pressure under the control or maintain the desirable limit of inflation. Now, let us concentrate on fiscal measures. So, apart from these monetary measures, the government also uses some fiscal measures to control this inflation. The country's fiscal policy actually it has two main components. One is government revenue and the second one is government expenditure. Therefore, the government can change the tax rates to increase its revenue or manage its expenditure. So, when the aggregate demand exceeds the aggregate supply, an inflationary gap arises. Therefore, the government can take these fiscal measures to control inflation. So, take these steps to reduce the overall government expenditure and transfer payments. Increase the rate of taxes, causing these individuals to decrease their total expenditure, leading to a decrease in demand and a drop in the money supply in the economy. The government can also use a combination of these two to obtain a reasonable control of the inflation. So, in this way, with the help of monetary policy as well as fiscal policy, we can control this inflation, right? So, in order to control this cost-push inflation, the government uses direct control measures. It includes freezing the wages of workers, putting upper limits on the prices of important inputs like electricity, coal, or steel. While these steps can control the extent of inflation, it is not a good law for the long term. So, at the end of the day, identifying the cause of inflation is the best way to control inflation. Some other measures also control inflation, that is increasing imports to increase the supply of commodities in the domestic market or increasing the domestic production. So, these are the main measures to reduce the inflation. Okay, students, the remaining aspect we will discuss in the next class. Thank you.